Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our CrimeView Fire Review customer webinar series, which takes place the third Wednesday of each month at this time. We're glad you've joined us, and for those of you that might be joining us for the first time, either listening to this live webinar recording now or sorry, live webinar broadcast or the recording afterwards, we're glad you've joined us, and we just want to make sure you realize that we do these every month. We have different topics that we announce a day ahead of time and then also 15 minutes before the live webinar. And then we will also send out a link to the recording following each one of these. So if it doesn't work to join the live webinar, you're always welcome to catch the recording link afterwards. But one of the advantages of joining us live each month is that you can ask your specific questions on the topic. So to do that, you have a dashboard, a GoToWebinar dashboard in front of you. And if that collapses at any point throughout the presentation, you can go ahead and expand it by clicking on that red arrow. But please go ahead and enter questions at any point throughout today's presentation. And Michael Bouvet, who is our GIS analyst and who will be presenting today, will get to those questions at the end of his presentation. But you are welcome to enter them as they pop into your head and at any point during the presentation. Mark Jenkins, one of our implementation specialists, is also joining us today, so he'll be around for the Q&A session as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and change the presentation over to Michael. Good afternoon, Michael, or morning actually in your part of the world.
Good morning. Thank you, Sherry, for the introduction. Do you all see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, cool. All right. Once again, thank you for the introduction and thank you all for being here. I'll be starting off with a brief presentation to go over the concepts and key items of today's topic. What we'll cover will apply to both CrimeView and FireView, since the functionality between both applications are very similar in nature. In this presentation, I'm going to go over what roles and users are and how to manage them. I will tackle these topics in two separate sections that each focus on users and roles respectively. I will explain how users and roles provide simplicity and flexibility in managing access to content. In the final section, I will provide 3 ways to use roles to keep your dashboard simple and focused. Central to our topic today and the takeaway is understanding how users and roles can make your dashboard most effective. So what exactly are users? Users are the various accounts that access, utilize, and maintain the dashboard. There are 3 types of users. Standard users are often the majority of your user base. These are read-only accounts, and they have no way to edit or manage content in terms of briefing books, query layers, and geography layers. The ability to access these items can also be limited to varying degrees. Also, their ability to create and edit spatial notes can be limited. An unlimited number of these users can be created. The second type of user are designer users, and they usually make up a smaller portion of your users and have more specialized capabilities. These types of users can create new briefing books, delete briefing books they created, and manage widgets within briefing books that they have been granted access to. Admin users are the third type of users and have the most power, so to say. Admin users can limit their access, admin users can view all briefing books, manage all briefing books, and manage all roles and manage all users. Usually there are 2 types. There are 2 admin users, and sometimes there is a third admin user, which is the support account. So if you're an admin user, how do you manage your users? This is done in designer mode, which can be accessed by clicking the golden shield symbol in the top left-hand corner for CrimeView dashboard and the fire symbol in FireView dashboard. Once you are in designer mode, you will click on the User Access tab as indicated in red on this screenshot. You will also see a list of existing users on the left side of the screen. You can edit and delete users from this list using the buttons at the bottom left side of the screen. You can also create users using the Create button underneath the users list. So how do you create new users? To create a new user, you will click the Create User button under the list of users as indicated in red on the screen. Users can also sign up to be approved for an account at login. In the screen that pops up, you will select the type of user. You will enter a username, which is often an email account. You'll type in the first and last name. You'll also enter the email account from which the user can reset their password. You can choose the format of those emails between text or HTML. You can set the active account. You can set the account to be active or inactive. And very importantly, you will assign the roles to them. You can also set the default briefing book. This is going to be the briefing book that they see when they first log in. You can then also set them up to have the hot sheet panel open upon login. You can also have the logo displayed, and then you can also set the result display method. And finally, you can check on whether the user can save or publish note submissions. Once you have all that set, you're going to click OK, and the user account will be created. An email will then be sent to the new user to the email address that you set up in the email section, asking them to set up a new password within 24 hours. If they don't, the account does not get set up. Now that we know how to make a user, we need to know how to edit one. You can make changes to everything you set up when you created the user by selecting the user in the user accounts list and clicking Edit User at the bottom left-hand side as indicated in red on the screenshot here. This will bring up a screen with all the parameters that were in the Create User screen with the exception of Reset Password as indicated in red on the screen here. When you click Yes to this Reset Password option, the user will receive an email containing a temporary password. The next time they log in, the user will be required to set up a new password. The user can also reset their password using the Forgot Password functionality at login. This is where you can assign and unassign roles as indicated in yellow as well. Once you have everything, all the changes that you want done to it, you can click OK and the user will be edited. So now we know how to create and edit users. What about those times when we need to delete a user? It's really simple. All you do is you go to where all the other two buttons are on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, and you click delete. You first want to select the user in the user accounts list, and then you want to click delete user at the bottom left-hand side. All right. Now that I've shown you through these slides, how to manage the users, I'm going to show you a live demonstration. So give me a moment just to go to a dashboard. All right. So as I mentioned in the slide, what you'll want to do is you'll want to go, in this case, since we're in Crime View, go to the golden shield symbol in the top left-hand corner, and you're going to go to Designer mode. You're going to want to go to the User Access tab, and then you're going to see your list of user accounts right here. So you want to create a user, you go down right over here, click that. You make sure you set it to the correct user type. In this case, I'm going to do a standard user. I'm going to make the username, which in this case, I'll do me right now. So usually it's a user account. I've seen people, just do their own unique usernames. Okay. I'm going to put my first and last name, and then I'll put the email account that I want my password to be sent to. This is important to make sure that this is correct because sometimes, if you're using like a unique user account or you're using a different email for the username, but you want it to have the password communication sent over to a different email account, you want to make sure that that is correct here. The email format, I'll choose it here. This is important when sometimes network firewalls can be blocking HTML emails, but usually they always accept text emails. So I like to err on the side of caution, so I usually just do a text email. I'll make sure that the account is active, and then I will assign it to a role. Since this is a standard user, I'm just going to give it, I'll just give it the demo team role. I'll set the default briefing book. In this case, I'm choosing the command team demo. I don't want the hot sheet panel to open upon login. It's just a personal preference, so I won't check that on. I won't also put the display logo either. I'll keep the set result display method, and then I'll allow the user to save and publish note submissions. Once I've checked that everything's good to go, I'll go ahead and press OK, and this will create the user. So now I want to show you how to edit the user. So since there's a huge list of accounts here, you can use the search bar on top to narrow your search down. So I see that there's already another user account for me in here, but this is the one that I was editing, that I created, excuse me. So what I'm going to do, since I found my user account, I'm going to click on it so it's selected, and then I'm going to click at the bottom, Edit User. So bring up pretty much the same screen as before, except for the reset password that I mentioned. I'm going to, if you need to have the password reset, you can click yes, and then when I click OK, it will send the email like I mentioned in the slides. I'm not going to do that right now since I'm not going to need this account in the future. But if you want to make any other changes, you do it here, and then you click OK, and the user is edited. So now that maybe this person does no longer work at your agency, or for whatever reason you need to remove the user, it's very simple. You just click on the user account that you want to delete, go to the bottom, and click Delete User. You will get a prompt asking if you're sure, because you don't want to always delete users. It might want to avoid a mistake. Then click Yes, and it should be gone. Let me try that again. Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. Just try this one more time. Guess it's because I'm not an admin. Well, anyway, well, that's that. Let's go ahead back to our presentation and continue on with that. All right. Moving on. Now that we fully understand what users are and how to manage them, we need to know what roles are and how they are managed. Dashboard roles are created by the site administrators to grant or limit the user's access to dashboard content. Roles are a permissions bridge that control access between users and content. Admins can control access to geography layers, query layers, briefing books, hot sheet alerts, and queries on demand. The general rule of thumb that you want to follow with roles is that they should be created with the intent to limit or grant access to specific content. This is because one thing that is especially important to remember is that content is not visible until it is placed into a role. So how do you create roles? Roles are created and managed much in the same way as users are. In fact, it's also in the User Access tab. Like users, there is a list of roles with the Create, Edit, and Delete role buttons at the bottom. However, this is on the right side. Okay. To create a role, what you want to do is you'll want to click Create Role at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. In the screen that pops up, as seen on the screenshot on the left-hand side, you will want to type the name of the role and check the content that the role will have access to. As displayed in the screenshot on the right, you can filter by the content type so that you can select based off of a narrower list of content types. These content types include alert group, base map layer, briefing books, geography layers, permission notes, and note permission groups, operational layers, query layers, and query groups. Once you have selected everything, you can click OK, and the role is created. To edit an existing role, you'll want to select the role in the roles list and click Edit Role at the bottom right-hand side. This will bring up a screen with all the parameters that were in the Create Role screen, as seen on the screenshot on the left. Here, you will be able to change the name of the role and check the content that the role will have access to. As seen on the right-hand side of the screen, you can also filter by content type, so that making changes to the different types of content is much easier. Okay, so now that we know how to create and edit roles, we need to know how to delete them. You can delete a role by selecting the role in the roles list and then clicking Delete Role underneath Create Role at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. All right, so now I'm going to do a demonstration of how to manage roles. Just give me one moment to transition to the screen. All right, so right here, we're back in the User Access tab. It's the same way to get to the user accounts. It's in fact in the same screen. So if you want to create a role, you simply press Create Role at the bottom of the screen. Type in the name. So I'm going to call it Test for this instance. And then you can go here and check all the different content that you want to have that role have access to. Now, because you can see here the content type list is very, very long. So what you want to do is you want to use the filter by to maybe just narrow it down by content type. So for example, if I know that I just want them to have access to certain briefing books, I'm going to go here, click briefing book, and then I'll make the changes there. Once the role is created, once I'm done with all of the different parameters in the role, I'm going to click OK, and the role will be created. So now that I know how to create the role, to edit a role, you simply select the role in the roles list. You then click Edit Role, and then you make your changes here. You can use the filter by option the same way as in when you created the role. Once you have made your changes to the content that is assigned to that role, you click OK, and the role is edited. Now to delete the role, it's very simple. You simply click the role that you want deleted, and you go down to the bottom and click Delete Role. You'll get that message again saying whether you are sure or not, and you'll click yes if you're sure, no if you're not, and then the role will be deleted. All right, I'm going to turn back over to the presentation again. All right. Okay, now that we understand and know how to manage users and roles, I want to explain how flexible these are and how simple they can be. The interplay between roles and users is meant to allow the greatest flexibility in controlling user access to content. This is because roles allow you to manage access for groups of users rather than having to edit each single user's permissions. For example, it is much easier to change the content patrol officers have access to by editing their designated role rather than going through each one of those patrol officers' account and changing their access one by one. This is especially true when dealing with large numbers of users. You would not want to spend a large amount of time tediously editing each user. Rather, you can go and just edit the role that the patrol officers are assigned to once and then have all the changes given out to all the officers. This provides you the flexibility to change access as needed, especially if you're having your access needs to change regularly. Roles are also most effective when they are simple. You don't want to make more than you need. This is because you will lose the flexibility that I explained in the previous slide by having too many roles. For example, having separate but identical roles for different groups of patrol officers will be much more difficult to manage when you need to change all patrol officers' access. Rather than updating just one role, you will need to edit multiple roles. To get the most out of your dashboard, you will want to keep it focused and simple in terms of users and roles. The following are some suggested scenarios that do just that. Wide open, one role with access to everything. Simplicity-oriented roles. This is a scenario where you keep the application more simple and focused for users. I think I skipped one of them. Excuse me, let me go back to that. So what I meant to say was security-oriented roles restrict access to data sets, briefing books, etc., while simplicity-oriented roles keep the application more simple and focused for users. In the following slides, I will explain each one more in depth. So the wide open scenario involves having one role that provides access to all content. When users are created, they are assigned this sole role. Your choice of using this scenario will be best for an agency that does not have any restrictions on content access, or the dashboard is used for one single user group. An example of this would be in a hypothetical case of a crime analysis unit. An all data, maps, layers, and content role is created, which has access to all content. And in the visual I have right here, it includes data sets, maps, geography layers, and other content. So there's one role that is assigned to everyone. In the case of in the crime analysis unit, there's possibly seven officers that use the dashboard, only them, and they all have the same security clearance for all content. So it allows you to have a very simple users and roles scenario. All of them have the same clearance, so they can all access the same data, so there's no need to make it more complicated than that. All right. In the security-oriented role scenario, certain content types are restricted to only a select group of users out of the entirety of all users. This will involve putting all shared content in a single role, including base maps, geography layers, operational layers, query layers that everyone can use. This role will be granted to all users. In addition to this role, another is created that is assigned only to select users. This role will have content that is not available to the other users. Those that have this separate role will still have the role that all other users have. Here's an example. A shared content role is created that includes content that all users can use, as in the case of this diagram right here, where it's called all data, maps, layers, and content. This may include, the content that everyone can use. However, for the fire chief and assistant chief, there will be one role that includes a briefing book that contains sensitive data called the executive role. Well, in this case, I have it called the fire chief's role in the diagram. The fire chief and assistant chief will have this shared role content, and the executive role, the fire chief's role, while all the users will only have that shared content role. Okay. In the simplicity-oriented role scenario, the goal is to have each user have only one or a few briefing books, query, or alert groups that they can access. When a user logs in, they will only have access to one or a few briefing books rather than the many that may be available and the dashboard as a whole. In the diagram you see here, you can kind of see this playing out. The example that I have is there are three teams: vice users, narcotics users, and vehicle users, and stolen vehicle users, excuse me. Each of those teams has their own separate role that has access to content specific to them. The vice role has access to vice briefing books, vice base map layers, vice data sets, while they also have an overview briefing book that is shared by the other three groups. The narcotics team, they have their own narcotics role that has access to narcotics content and also the overview briefing book that is shared between the others. Same thing for the stolen vehicle users. They have their own role with their own stolen vehicle content and access to the briefing book that everyone shares. Okay, this is really good for when you want to really control what users have access to, and when you have very many different teams and they don't have a lot of overlapping access. Okay, so we're nearing the end of our presentation here. Here are some of the takeaways that I really want you all to go home with. Users and roles are created and managed by only admin users in the User Access tab of Designer mode. Roles provide flexibility of managing content access to all users efficiently, and this is because you're basically only having to edit one item rather than having to go to each and every single user. One thing that really needs to be understood when dealing with roles is that content is not viewable unless it is added to a role. This is something that's very easy to forget sometimes because you would assume that a lot of content it just shows up when you log into dashboard, but it needs to be assigned to a role for it to be viewable by users. And then there are also the 3 recommended scenarios for roles and users. There's the wide open, the security-oriented roles, and the simplicity-oriented roles. Just think of it as, getting from less restricted to more restricted access. The wide open role is going to be for everyone's going to have access to everything. Security-oriented roles, there's going to be that one subset of content that is very sensitive and only one subset of users can access. While the simplicity-oriented roles, they're just, you log in, you're part of one team, you get access to a specific set of content, and that's it, and that's how everyone is done. Okay? All right, now that I'm done with that, Mark and I will be open to questions.
Okay, and this is Sherry. I failed to introduce myself. I'm part of the marketing team here with TriTech, but just wanted to go ahead and remind anyone, if you do have questions and that dashboard has collapsed, you can go ahead and click on that reddish orangish arrow, expand it, and enter questions at this time. Right now I don't see any questions, but we can give it just a couple more moments to allow you time to finish typing if someone does have a specific question they'd like to ask of either Mark or Michael. Okay, I don't see anything coming in. Is there anything, Michael, that you wanted to mention before we end today?
I don't have anything. I think I went over, but if you guys have any questions, I also work in support, so feel free to email there as well.
All right, excellent. We do have a thank you. Okay, and I also say that as well, so express my gratitude. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Michael, for the presentation today. Everyone have a great day.
No problem. You all have a good day.
Bye now.